Morning, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, three subjects that we're looking at this week. Transport, obviously, today, and last night we had dinner. Housing tomorrow, and then the knowledge economy on Wednesday. Now, if you look at competitiveness and you look at the World Economic Forum's rankings, you see that transport infrastructure is probably one of the key drivers of competitiveness and attractiveness for cities. So we've got a really good panel this morning. I'm not going to introduce them, Mark will do that, but what I just wanted to do was just get across to you that this is a debate and it's a discussion. It's not listening to the panel and we're all sitting there having a quiet coffee and a croissant. We are expecting everyone in the room, maybe not everyone depending on time, but we are expecting a dialogue, and you'll learn that if we do more ULI events that that's exactly what we like to try and achieve, is to create an environment where we can actually all learn something from it. We then take that information away, and our head office is in Washington in the States, which we provide information to our colleagues over there, and then they will then disseminate that around the world to our other colleagues. So it's an important learning curve for us as what's going on in the Midlands, what's going on nationally, but we certainly see some really good opportunities in this city and the city region. Am I allowed to say Greater Birmingham? I'm not sure if I am, but I look at it as Greater Birmingham. Yeah, there we are. We've had an official response from Mark Barrow, the City Council. And just on a final point, we are recording this. This is really for our own use, but I know that we've got one or two bloggers in the room, so you do take it on board that this is a public and open event. So, Mark, I'll hand over to you, and thank you very much all for coming.
Thank you, Martin. Welcome from me. I'll get into the debate very, very quickly. Just to say, as Martin said, we do have a couple of bloggers here today, and obviously we want to try and get some of that content out and about. If you are one of that strange breed called tweeters yourself, we have one of those things called a hashtag, which is hashtag ULI Transp. So joining the debate there, I think we've got Paul from the Chamberlain Files, who will be probably lobbing all kinds of comments into the ether. As Martin said, the ULI is focusing on three core issues this week, and I think it's entirely appropriate that the very first on this pretty much first full day of the conference gets straight to probably one of the most pivotal for this region and the UK. And so I'd like to invite the panellists to introduce themselves in just 2 moments and take maybe a couple of minutes each themselves to maybe reflect on that prominence of transport in the context of we've got a West Coast mainline contract that's been literally thrown back at the drawing board. We've got an aviation policy that similarly, in terms of the independent review, has taken that issue into what some people are describing the long grass. Some people are still sceptical over HS2. I'm sure we've all got our own views on the rate of progress and direction of travel for that issue. But given this apparent hiatus, is this an omnishambles that is going to be very, very damaging for this region in particular, but transport policy generally for the government? Or is it a moment for seizing the initiative and taking it forward, in which case, what the hell should we be doing, and what would you, panellists, be asking of this audience in terms of taking that opportunity? So, Tom, if I can start with you. As I said, a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, and we'll get going. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom McGrath, Policy and Strategy Director with CENTRO, and we coordinate public transport in particular and integrated transport across the West Midlands area. I think that the points I want to make really are about where we see ourselves in Birmingham at the moment. And what is great is there is change, and that's change for the good as far as I see it. There's pace, and as part of that, we're getting that connectivity, which, as Martin said, is really absolutely essential for Birmingham as a global city. I just want to pick out a sort of couple of examples, and perhaps a question or two afterwards. I think why I'm excited about change and pace is that by 2015, Birmingham will have a £600 million redeveloped transport hub in New Street Station, a £65 million runway extension at Birmingham Airport, and a £127 million extension of the Midland Metro tram system right through the city centre. And high-speed rail, of course, as mentioned, is also expected to be on the statute books by 2015, and I think that's going to be a really significant year for Birmingham. But what's really important is actually how we take advantage of those opportunities. And if you take the example of HS2, it's really making sure that getting 2 stops serving Birmingham city centre and the wider West Midlands area, you know, those stops need connection. And what's really important from my point of view and your point of view is that we have that good connectivity to those 2 stops serving the West Midlands. And what we've found from work we've done is that network enhancements can more than double the benefits of HS2. And that increases, we've worked out that it increases the number of jobs created to 22,000 new jobs and raising the annual boost to the regional economy to £1.5 billion. If we didn't get that, those benefits would only be half. If we don't get that local connectivity serving all parts of the area, you know, so I think that the final point is actually improving the transport networks also encourages people to switch from cars, which in turn cuts traffic congestion, and we know that traffic congestion pardon me, costs our region's businesses more than £2.3 billion a year and stifles economic growth. Now, my question to you is actually, we've got that pace, we've got that momentum, how do we keep it going, and how do we engage public-private? Are the local enterprise partnerships the answer for bringing in that sort of balance of making sure we're responding to the economic requirements of transport, or what other alternatives would you suggest? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tom. Duncan, are you as optimistic, and what challenges would you throw in for the audience?
Yeah, I'm just by way of background, I'm a partner at Wragge & Co. I'm a planning lawyer, so I frequently act on projects, including transport projects, and have to deal with policy. And one of your questions, your first question was, is it an omnishambles? I think yes. But I have to say, I think with the exception of aviation policy, it's not something just to lay at the door of this government, because I think in the UK we've failed miserably to grapple with the idea or concept of integrated transport. And government is always producing, successive governments are always producing policy on transport in silos. So you have a policy on rail, policy on roads, policy on ports, policy on airports, and there never seems to be coordination between them. There never seems to be a big plan or a strategy about how, you know, for example, if you have a port on the coast or an airport, how the surface access should be procured, what it should do, where it should go to, what are the main nodes that should be linked up, and that is one big failing. Is it an opportunity for somewhere like Birmingham? I think yes, in the sense that wherever there's an absence of national leadership, and in a way, as we were discussing at dinner yesterday, you know, this is what the Tories' localism policy is about. You know, giving the chance for local authorities and other stakeholders to come together and do something for themselves. So it is an opportunity, but I think it's hugely complex. There are far too many stakeholders. You're not just dealing with you know, political allies and colleagues in the region. You're dealing with national agencies, and trying to get your head around them all is a huge challenge, and it needs extremely strong leadership. I also think the issue is probably bigger than Birmingham. My view is that, you know, the future transport strategy for Birmingham is tied in with the future of English regional cities generally, and in particular how each regional city relates to the other and the world around it. And you know, that means that, you know, really there's coordination. If it's not going to be led by national government, it needs to be led through the cities in the regions coming together and working out how they relate to each other and what they can do for the UK.
That sounds like the challenge then. Who's going to be providing the leadership in this particular case? Paul, I suspect you might have a view.
A number, as always. Good morning, everyone. I mean, I think if we look back, the city's got a great heritage in transportation, whether it's canals, rail or road. It's been at the centre of all those three. And that heritage has led us to a position where we have all the ingredients to a bright and prosperous future. But we are on the verge of making some momentous decisions. You've heard them already, but not only including classic rail, when we sort out whether it's Virgin or First Great Western or on grey trains, as the government may take back under control, HS2, the runway extension at the airport, all are game-changing opportunities for us. And if we are to be a global city, we need connectivity to markets. And I think the resurgence of manufacturing, suddenly manufacturing is a sexy industry again. Perhaps saying that in a professional services organisation where we are this morning may not get out well, but actually manufacturing has been there plugging away, building things, making things, and now building things that the world wants, and markets are vital to that. Just look at the success of Jaguar Land Rover. Look where the number one market is. It's China, not the US, and the access to those markets are vital. And of course, we're 20 years too late in terms of the airport for delivering that. We should have been building our runway extension 20 years ago when it was first mooted. We're now doing it, and hopefully we can catch up. But we have the confidence, we have the courage of our convictions to be bold and brave and to move forward. People are investing in the city, and I do believe that we will be a top 25 city. That's what Albert Bohr and Mike Whitby both said. They want to be a top 25 city. And what are the things that a top 25 city has? Well, it is a great transportation infrastructure. It's a great place to live and work, and it's a great place to connect to. So we have to be bold and brave. And the question I have is, are we on the verge of moving into those sunlit uplands? Is Birmingham there? I think it might be, because when you look around the rest of the UK, there are problems in London of overheating. There are problems in the northeast where there's massive unemployment still. And I think Birmingham is in the Goldilocks zone. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. And if we just get it right, we can make a great success of it.
Thank you. Mark, your reflections, please, and then we'll go to the audience.
Okay. I think for me, kind of the leading bit really here is what's Birmingham's kind of key role as one of the country's economic metro engines, really, and what's the role that transport plays in underpinning that. So very much kind of echo the theme of connectivity that Tom used. So whether that's connectivity into the global markets or whether it's nationally, and remember the high-speed rail goes north as well as south, or whether it's actually about how we connect everybody in the conurbation and the Greater Birmingham area into the heart of the economy and all of that kind of transport interchange that is either the airport or will be high speed or all of the kind of rich and diverse cultural activity. There's just something about having an urban mobility structure for the conurbation that feels like, is an opportunity just around the corner. I actually think we're probably, in the context of the life cycle of the city, going through a bit of a renaissance period at the moment in terms of transport investment. Remember that the Amy PFI contract as well that we've entered will spend more money in the next 5 years than we've spent on our roads in the last 25 years. So in addition to high speed, in addition to the expansion of the airport, this is about everything to do with transport-related infrastructure in a number of ways. Your question about leadership, Mark, I think, we're in a strange kind of economic cycle, actually. I think all of the kind of historical patterns in economic cycles that we used to follow have kind of gone, because this is not a consumer-led recovery and nor a government spending a lot of money. And it's, we're all sort of looking for where does the kind of break in that kind of grey cloud come from to give us all a bit of confidence. I think actually it's coming from a local level. I think we're investing very ambitiously in the local economy. I think particularly we're investing in all of the infrastructure and transport infrastructure is a great example here. Because all of that is just adding up, I think, to a climate of some growing confidence at a local level that people recognise we're doing the right kind of things. Our transport-related investments are kind of sensible. There's a narrative that fits in the wider context. whether it is global, whether it is about foreign airlines wanting to kind of point-to-point connections with our economy. People get the sense that actually getting to London on high speed, less than 40 minutes, maybe fly into Birmingham as a hub airport, and then a journey time that's equivalent of Zone 4 on the Underground into the centre of London is actually quite a compelling story, to be frank. But there is this bit about actually how important maybe is it to get to Newcastle in 2 hours or 2.5 hours, and maybe stop at Leeds on the way. And that for me is this thing about the 8 core cities in London and half of this country's GDP. And when you look at Germany, everybody talks about how strong Germany is because of the kind of federal approach and the kind of strength of the sub-regional areas. So the theme of transportation though is what knits all that together, I think.
Okay. If you do want to ask a question, just either throw something in my direction or raise a hand, preferably. That'd be useful. In the meantime, we've heard about leadership. We've also heard a note of optimism. And Mark, if I can get back to you straight away, you're saying that this region, and by implication other regions, are now starting to take up the government's challenge to do it for themselves. But you can't do it for yourself. I mean, today the LEP has launched the strategy for growth, of which a new transport city deal is part. You do still need to go to government, don't you, to ask for permission? Paul, you're going to be waiting for the strategic aviation review to come into place. We can do some on our own, but we do need more help. What are you going to be asking for in the city deal?
Well, I think at the heart of the next round of city deal will be a range of transport-related kind of asks, to be frank. I think I'm one of those people that holds the government to account for the coalition agreement, and this is a quote, talks of radical devolution of power and responsibility. And City Deal 1, the narrative of City Deal 1 was they wanted licensed exemptions to national policy, which is kind of quite a bit different than radical devolution of power and responsibility. So I'll be honest, we've been working very actively to use the opportunity of the Heseltine review to try and bring that agenda back to the table and stitch all of this together with a kind of vision for the area. So I think the city's shown that its partners in the LEP, it's ambitious, it's prepared to kind of borrow money, it's prepared to kind of leverage its assets. The story of our enterprise zone is, we're borrowing already £130 million against that business rate uplift. It is, put your money where your mouth is territory, to be frank.
And Paul, when and how are you going to get the answer that you want out into the aviation strategy?
Well, actually, I don't need an aviation strategy to do what we need to do. And the problem that we have with aviation, it's a now problem. Everyone talks about the economy now. And we need a hub airport in the southeast now. And we need runway 3 now. Unfortunately, now, for Boris Island, is 15 to 20 years away. Runway 3 is 10 years away. And a second runway gap is 7 years away. So the now problem's not going to be solved by building runways in the southeast. And I also believe that aviation or airport policy is dictated by airline strategy. Who would have thought of having an airline to create a hub anywhere in the world? But unfortunately, there's 3 classic examples. Emirates at Dubai, Etihad Abu Dhabi, Qatar at Doha. And of course we have British Airways, which has abandoned the UK and gone back into Heathrow. So we had for 60 years a very successful British Airways operation. 3 million people used that operation out of Birmingham, and in 2007 the airline strategy was changed. They went back to Heathrow and 3 million people walked out of the door of Birmingham, and with that went trade, connectivity, because let's face it, British Airways is the national flag carrier of the UK. It is a very good airline, whether we like it or not. It compares really well with others. So what we need to do is find an airline that will actually invest and promote Birmingham. It's going to be difficult trying to persuade British Airways to do that. Willie Walsh has said his strategy is across Europe, not just in the UK. So he's actively building his alliance with American for European operations across the transatlantic. He's invested with IAG into Spain and looking at how Madrid grows. So we've got to find someone else who'll fill that gap. And unfortunately, we may not like it, but actually Lufthansa are filling that gap for us. And the Star Alliance, which Lufthansa is one of the lead carriers, are building a base at Birmingham through Turkish, through Swiss, through SN Brussels. And it may not be the national flag carrier of the UK, but they are building a traffic hub there that we can serve and grow. And I think in the the vacuum that we have, someone will fill it. And people actually prefer to go from local airports. There's no doubt about that. They don't like the big hubs. If they can get away with it, they will go into local airports and fly point-to-point traffic. And the market is designing two types of aeroplane. One is the big hub-to-hub aeroplane, the Airbus A380, and Boeing and Airbus are both building hub bypass aeroplanes, the Boeing 787, the Dreamliner, and the new Airbus A350. And I think people who have a choice of flying direct into markets will go from Birmingham to Beijing or Birmingham to Chengdu ultimately. Not today, we haven't got a runway that's long enough, but ultimately they will go on those routes because that's what the market does. People want access and they should be agnostic as to the route they fly. But I do accept that brand is very important, and British Airways is a great brand, which is why we export 4 million people a year from Birmingham down the M1, down the M40 to Heathrow, and we need to get those people back so we get that economic value back in our community.
Paul, are you saying that Birmingham BHX's best hope, therefore, is to let the market via the airline supply and demand sort out the issues that we've got, and therefore you're not particularly worried about where the aviation review goes?
I'm desperately worried where the aviation review goes. However, that's going to take time. Even the Davis Commission on this is going to be 15 to 18 months away. Our runway will be operating it then. One of the problems we have in the UK is that the government has levers to change the policy today without pouring concrete. One would be to actually, we have this thing called air passenger duty, a tax on business for flying, a tax on leisure flying as well. Yet we actually give free passage. We don't charge tax on those passengers going through Heathrow who are connecting from a European flight to another flight. So the Treasury is losing £400 million a year of duty because those passengers are not paying it at Heathrow on transfer passengers. But we have the bizarre situation where a passenger going to and from Edinburgh from Birmingham pays double taxation. So we can start to change the tax regime. That's the first thing we can do. And that Chancellor can still get his £3 billion a year. The second thing you can do is, why would you have a Breitling watch or a Prada handbag and sell it at cost or sell it below market price? Why would you sell it for a few pounds? Why would you sell a passenger experience at Heathrow for 16 quid when actually the market price should be closer to 80 or 90 pounds per passenger? And that's what we're doing, because the regulator sits on that, and therefore that's why the airlines want to go there. You've got a very important city, the City of London, generating lots of first class and business class passengers, but then you cap the charges that you can make at that airport, and actually that distorts the market. It makes it a very cheap operation. So my view would be, take the cap off Heathrow, charge appropriate tax into Heathrow, and let's see if there's some trickle-down economics. And there are those airlines that can't afford slots at Heathrow that might go to other airports. And we might see more travelling into the regions just by doing those particular two levers today.
Duncan, with the kind of disparities that Paul was just describing there in terms of Heathrow getting a better deal than elsewhere, is that an example of the lack of an integrated transport strategy that you were talking about?
No, well, I don't think so, no. I mean, I think Paul's right, first of all, that a lot can happen without if we take aviation, and I've been at many discussions on transport, and aviation does tend to take over, so we must try to avoid that in a way. But I think there's a lot that can happen without an aviation strategy in place. I think actually it's an opportunity for an airport like Birmingham, and there are other airports as well, who could actually fill that vacuum, because Paul's right, I think even 10 and 15 years probably optimistic, given the track record that we've got in this country. So there's a long period where the gap has to be filled. To take Heathrow as a specific example, though, it is essential, in my view, to have a hub airport in the UK, and I would be more concerned about if Paul's idea was followed through, actually airlines going into a European hub and dropping Heathrow if the price didn't work, rather than coming into the regions. That would be my concern. But Paul probably knows far more on it than me.
Well, can I just come straight back on that particular thing? If we were in Germany, and we always look to Germany as a classic economy of, well, I don't think they do things really well in Germany, the trains run on time, they have a distributed model whereby Frankfurt, Munich, Berlin, Dusseldorf, and increasingly other cities are becoming important air hubs connected by rail. So when you fly into Cologne with Lufthansa from Birmingham, you fly to Frankfurt and then you fly a train on a single ticket. So that they've connected their airports and their rail system together. There's no reason why we can't do that. But equally, all those airports that we say, oh gosh, everyone's going to go leave Heathrow and go to Frankfurt or to Amsterdam or to Paris, those airports are going to be full as well very shortly. And where do we put the 4th and 5th runways in those airports? And if you look at the Frankfurt situation, they've just put a 4th runway in there, but it's closed at night. The whole airport's closed at night. But that was the deal they got. So there are real pressures on European airports as well as UK airports. And I'm very keen on the distributed hub model, and it does come down to the airlines can do that. And the reason that Germany works so well is Lufthansa has a distributed model. In our case, it is Heathrow. I think we've been sucked into the fact that the hub airports are all vital. Yes, it's important for us to have connectivity, but if it's really that vital, let's push out the point-to-point passengers that are clogging up the Heathrow arteries and heart, and move those people back into the regions. And the people will come. We've seen it. If we put a flight on, people will fly. Take the classic example of Emirates. It wasn't here in Birmingham 11 years ago. Today, 1,000 people leave, 1,000 people come in every day to Dubai. And airlines can create markets, and Emirates has done that, Lufthansa has done that, and British Airways has done it as well, but in the reverse. I think that connectivity to markets, having all your eggs in one basket, is not a good idea. And certainly in these very difficult strategic times where terrorism can play a role as well, if we close Heathrow down for a day or 2 days, the whole of Europe closes down. If Frankfurt goes on strike, the Germans don't worry about it because they send you over Munich, they send you over Berlin, they send you over Dusseldorf, and by the way, the Germans also own Brussels, SN Brussels, they own Swiss, and they own Austrian, so they can send you via other hubs as well. So your journey to those markets, the vital markets in China and India, are not disrupted by the fact that one of their eggs has been broken.
I mean, if I could just come on, Paul mentioned that you asked the question, is that an example of lack of integration? The lack of integration is with rail. And if you look at HS2, consistently the government's view of HS2 is an alternative to short-haul airline operations. So it's almost been used by politically as a way of reducing the pressure on Heathrow because people won't have to fly from Manchester to London, etc. But actually, it should be more about connecting airports. And it is. Hopefully, there will be a station at Birmingham Airport. But there needs to be connectivity between transport nodes like that, and also going back to the point I made at the beginning, connectivity between cities. And one view that I've heard expressed is that we would be better off spending the money that's being spent on HS2 in improving and creating high-speed links between regional cities, Birmingham, Leeds, Newcastle, Manchester, and creating a sort of circle of heavyweight economic powers that actually would act as a counterpoint to London.
Just like to remark on hearing the phrase "the Germans own Brussels." That was quite sort of
that have a significant
resonates to us historians of the Second World War. But.
Well, whatever which way you look at the German economy, it's a model economy, thanks to the euro, I suppose. But they actually own, as I said, Brussels Airlines, Swiss and Austrian, and therefore have a resilient model.
I will appeal for more questions from the floor if anyone has ones to ask. Nicola, I'll come to you in just 1 second, he said. But I did want to just ask Tom to... you threw out a challenge asking the audience, how do we keep momentum? And CENTRO is very active this week, lots of fringe events. Therefore, it seems to be that you're going to be asking the Conservative Party and therefore the government to help with that momentum. Throw your question back on yourself. What are you going to be asking for?
Well, I think, to my mind, I think the reason we're at all conferences is actually to make that link and to emphasise that link between growth, jobs, regeneration and connectivity. So the sorts of things we are talking about with government, very similar to what Mark was saying, but it's actually getting that deal or compact or agreement with government that have confidence, government, that we can play our part in providing that connectivity. We will deliver to time and to budget. We will provide our local investment to match, not equally, but to match the government contribution. And it's actually getting that, I suppose it is localism, isn't it? It's getting that trust that give us funding to help us deliver that connectivity which we need. And it's actually gaining trust, I think, with government that actually the West Midlands, Birmingham can do it. And I think what we've got now is a track record which shows that we can actually do that. So I think the ask to government is about trust us and make sure that we're getting the investment from central government to deliver what is necessary. I think the other thing, sort of slightly separate, you mentioned West Coast Main Line. I think the disappointment about that is actually what we don't want is paralysis. And I think what's really important, you know, I mentioned the pace and change, and we've got to keep that going. What you don't want is paralysis in terms of the national or local rail network, and that uncertainty about, you know, have we got a franchise or have we not, does undermine that confidence and investment. And when you think that locally and nationally, well, rail is growing 6% per annum in patronage, you know, it's something we've got to build on. And we're particularly concerned because recognising that West Coast Main Line is a national franchise, hugely important locally in the West Midlands to us, but it's also important in principle because we want to take back the London Midland franchise in 2015. I don't mean take it back, but we want actually to have some influence locally on your behalf, in effect, about what sort of local and regional services we want in the future. And therefore our plans to actually specify with government agreement a new franchise from 2015 for London Midland is really important. And if that gets delayed, put on hold, we lose that momentum, we lose that pace, risk of paralysis, you know, and we don't, none of us want to go there, I don't think.
That's very clear, Tom. Nicola, can you say who you are for the benefit of those who don't know and then ask?
Nicola Fleet-Milne, Chair of Birmingham Future. I'm quite interested in the lack of integration, actually, Duncan, you mentioned this. I was going to ask you who would be our sort of model city in Europe, that's clearly, or country, and that's clearly Germany. Is there anything that we can learn from Germany, and do we get experts in from Germany to try and change the way that we're doing things, excuse me, at the moment? Mainly because I think this is almost slightly part of the British psyche to have empires and not really want to share between them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is an institutional problem. I mean, and it probably starts. Careful what I say. I think it actually starts with the Department for Transport, which is made up of lots of different departments for rail, Department for Ports, Department for Airports, and you know, in fairness to them, I know they are, you know, they've got a strategy unit and they are actively trying to break that down. But I think Paul probably would also recognise the fact that you know, there is. To give you an example, when I was acting for a number of clients in relation to Crossrail, and most of those clients, which is, for those who don't know, the East-West London main line link that's going to go underground in central London. And lots of those clients were supportive in principle, but they had some detailed objections, so that's why we were in front of DfT negotiating. And I won't say who, one of those clients was a transport operator and made some points about how this particular scheme would affect that operation. And there was a complete lack of knowledge of how that other transport system operated. It wasn't obviously another rail network, but the people who were dealing with Crossrail and DfT only really understood rail, and they didn't understand how other transport networks operated. fairly detailed points, but their colleagues could have told them all about it, and they were probably sitting down the corridor, but there wasn't that dialogue. So I think it starts at that level, and my suspicion is that gets replicated further down, unless you have strong leadership. And an example of strong leadership at the moment is London government and the Mayor of London, who is providing that leadership and an overview. And that's the kind of model that I think we need in different parts of the country, to be honest.
Do you think we can do that?
Recently, that's proved to be difficult, but I think it may not be a mayoral model that is right for everywhere, but I think there needs to be, yes, a body that has the power, political power, to strategically look at networks in a transport context, but also housing and other issues, and to have a real influence on what happens, both in terms of the economics and in terms of policy.
Mark, you know I'm going to throw this one at you in terms of the LEP. Some observers have said that the first city deal was a little bit of a bloody nose for the Solihull and Greater Birmingham LEP, in that the government had made it clear it wanted particular kinds of leadership in order to establish the trust that Tom's talked about. You're now going back for the city deal phase 2. How and why are you so confident that we'll get a better one this time?
Thanks for that. Well, interestingly, a week last Friday, we all had to make submissions to government on something called local transport bodies and agreed kind of geographies. And our LEP agreed unanimously on a LEP-wide framework for that. And there are discussions going on with other neighbouring areas around how they can work together. And I think all of that adds up to a really promising picture, to be frank. I think the interesting thing about local transport bodies, and this is for all of us maybe a message in any form of government, is sometimes the most important thing you can do is get out of the way. And when you look at the time it takes to land, let's say, a major capital scheme from DFT at the moment, it's about 5 years. Now, in that kind of planning horizon, how the hell do you cope with a big inward investment opportunity, let's say like the engine plant for JLR? So the question is really, I don't think there should be a kind of proof test on government as to why we should be trusted. I think we've all kind of shown that we can deliver things, and we're all incredibly creative. It almost needs to be turned around on them as to say, well, you tell us why we should stick with the status quo, because actually you're holding us all back. And there's lots of evidence around how LEPs have worked together. We've got a number of regional growth fund schemes where we're working with a number of LEPs. The Advanced Manufacturing Supply Chain one is a good one, where we in the Black Country, Coventry, and the Mersey Partnership are working very well in partnership. So I think confidence is growing in government, to be honest. When you say we had a bloody nose, actually I think they were uncertain at the time how well LEPs would develop, and there was a little bit of proof in the pudding to go, and I think we've kind of shown that we can go away and we can deliver things. So I think their confidence in us has grown in the meantime. And you've got to remember that LEPs are a body that are literally 2 years old, and they started with no powers, no responsibilities and no assets. And now look at what influence they've got. And increasingly, a lot of things that are coming from government are coming on a LEP-related geography. The question, I think, in a lot of people's minds is, when you've got a broad conurbation as we have, is how are all those LEPs going to work together effectively? And I think that's just the leadership challenge that everyone's kind of, dealing with at the moment. But I think we're in a good place, if I'm honest.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello, Lynn Richards-Cole, Aon and Director of Birmingham Forward. I'd like to ask the panel a controversial question. Do you think the fact that we don't have an elected mayor in Birmingham, that it has disadvantaged connectivity issue and connectivity within the UK between northern cities and indeed in the world?
It's a kind of question you want to say pass on, really, isn't it?
Well, I think Mark's touched on the issue of sort of maybe regional government. I think it's interesting that the Black Country Chamber is calling for the Black Country boroughs to be merged into one in order to maybe be of a larger size and show leadership. But Tom, your chief exec is no great fan of elected mayors, but do you think this one is one that's going to come back?
I don't honestly know whether it'll come back or not, but I think what Mark said is about building alliances, because Birmingham depends on its wider catchment area to get people into work. The labour market extends well out beyond the LEP, beyond the metropolitan area into the Shire area, and it's actually making sure that we have those alliances which, well, from my point of view, get people in and out effectively to those jobs and create a good labour market access. But actually, it's those political alliances which are really important. And what we're doing at the moment, what everybody's doing at the moment in the West Midlands, is making sure we're getting those alliances right. And, you know, having a mayor still depends on those political alliances. Not having a mayor, perhaps even more important. And when you look at examples of how Manchester does it and how Leeds does it, you know, they have a combined authority in Manchester and Leeds, but actually that's held together by genuine joint working and genuine alliances, and I think that's really important. And I think, you know, can you get that single voice for Birmingham and the West Midlands? I think you can, and I think that's where we're starting to get to, because you know, I think everybody, you will probably acknowledge that we haven't punched our weight as effectively as Greater Manchester has in the last few years, but actually I think we're getting there now.
Martin, you.
Yeah, it's a question really for both Mark and Paul. It's about the ownership of the airport being predominantly public sector. Do you think that that's actually been a hindrance over the years, and as you go forward, do you think that I think there are 7, I don't know the facts, but I think there are 7 Met authorities that actually are involved with the ownership of the airport. Would that be better if it was more private sector, or maybe just one authority? If Birmingham, you know, Birmingham itself owned the airport, or is it not on the agenda, or does it not make any difference?
I think that's for you.
Okay, well, you say it's public sector, it's a private company. The public sector, the 7 districts of the West Midlands own 48.75%. The other 48.5% is owned by an organisation called Agile, which is effectively private equity, but is in fact 2 government pension funds, one in Ontario, Canada, the other out of Melbourne in Australia, and the other bit in the middle, the 2.75% that's left, is a trust for staff. If we look at examples of private sector airports, Heathrow is a private sector airport and actually has done remarkably well. You have to give credit to BAA. You know, I'm a big competitor of ours, and I would say this, wouldn't I? You know, I don't want BAA to go and grow even bigger, but they've done a great job with the assets they've got. And if you look at where they were to where they're going to, T5, the new T2, these are world-class assets. It'll be a great airport. It'll be a 2-runway airport, hopefully, for the future. Don't require a 3rd runway, but it's private sector run. You take Manchester, wholly owned by the local government, and they have done a cracking job. In 1954, they started on their journey. The city fathers of Manchester, we are going to have an airport asset to be proud of. And they started by nicking the radar from Liverpool Airport, which had just gone in, and put it into Manchester. They then built themselves this massive terminal, Terminal 1, the big black building with the control tower sitting on top of it, in 1960. And everyone said, you're mad. Then they lengthened their runway to beyond that which was required for airplanes at that time. You're mad. And yet a city that's half the size of Birmingham has an airport that's double the size of Birmingham. So I think there are arguments for both public and private sector. We have one that's rather interesting in that we have the public sector, who own less than half, but the people of Birmingham believe they own the airport. It is their airport, and absolutely it is their airport. And then we have these people sitting abroad who are very tough commercially, that drive the business forward. And at the moment we have a great consensus. The consensus is to make sure that we are operating to the maximum capability that we can. Just so happens the last 4 years have been the worst 4 years in the airport's history because of the recession, but actually we've not suffered as many as other airports have, whether they've been in public or private sector. So our model is sound at the moment, but clearly if someone wants to make an offer to our shareholders, then someone could, and I'm sure if the price is right, every man or woman has his or her price, and who knows what might happen. And airports are very sexy assets to buy. Even in these straitened times, you see the interest over Edinburgh, the sale of Edinburgh, the sale of Gatwick, the sale of Stansted, the sale of London City, all brought massive multiples and made lots of money for their shareholders.
And just follow that up, because there is a rumour circulating that one of the Mets is trying to sell at the moment, so obviously we're not going to mention any names because we are all on the record, but how does that work from a functioning point of view? I mean, do the other authorities get to buy in, one of the authorities, or can they not sell, or how does that?
There is a book that thick, about an inch and a half thick, which is the shareholder agreement between all the parties, and there are rules and regulations within that dictate how and why and when assets can be sold. I'm not going to recount that now, but it's quite complex. However, it would be from a directorial point of view, it would be nice to have fewer directors. I mean, the average board meeting at Birmingham Airport is 30 people. So that's quite a challenge, which is why we manage by consensus. Having fewer shareholders makes life a little more clearer. And takes out some...
It would be more competitive. You would be able to operate it more competitively if you could change the structure.
Some of the decision-making might be faster. And I think part of the problem that we've had over the runway extension is that we could have done this many years ago, but we went through the machinations of the changes of shareholding from the mid-90s and then again the mid-2000s, mid-noughties, where we changed the shareholding groups, and that takes time to settle in. You need to build trust between the shareholders. You need to get the right plans in place, and that's what we've done. But I do fear that the one regret I have is that we are only building the runway now rather than 10 or 15 years ago, and then we could have stolen a march back on Manchester. Because I come back to the basic fundamentals. Our economy is bigger than Manchester's, but our airport isn't. And another city I always use, and going back to the German example, Munich, which is publicly owned. Munich city, the same size as Birmingham, 1.2, 1.1 million people in the downtown area. Forget the metro area, because Birmingham is bigger. Munich is Europe's 6th largest airport, with 38 million passengers going through it. And they have very low unemployment, unlike the areas around Birmingham Airport. So I think having a public sector involvement is vital, because you need that attachment to the land.
One question here and then one at the back.
Sorry, Marc Reeves. Seeing the West Coast debacle last week and taking into account that we've had over 10 transport ministers over successive governments, what is the panel's view? Is the Department of Transport fit for purpose to deliver competitive advantage?
Who would like to pick this one up? Mark?
Well, I think I've already kind of set out. I think there does need to be a rebalancing. I think there is too much still that takes place in London. Actually, I don't think there's enough involvement, let's say regionally or locally, on things like the big national franchises, like the rail franchises. We should be involved much more in the kind of outputs and outcomes there. In terms of the big procurements, you can look across government of examples of kind of procurement horrors. You can there are hangars full of Westland helicopters, aren't there still? The question really for me is have they got that blend right of expertise? And it's a dark corner. And I've never seen into that black box what happens in government, if we're really honest. The thing that's really important for me is that what's just happened on the West Coast Main Line doesn't undermine the confidence in high speed too. And we've kind of sought reassurances on that, and we've had lots of reassurances back, because how people will kind of look across and say, well, if we got that one wrong, blah blah blah. So I think that's really important for the future of high speed too. So I think we'll see what comes out in the future. But is there a reason why a future model? Is there a reason why not a future model couldn't be strong regional areas working with government on such things as those big procurements? I think there should be, actually. And maybe picking up a part of what Martin was just asking, the great thing about public sector involvement in things like the airport at the moment is we're maybe making decisions that the private sector wouldn't do, because the things that are real benefits for us in terms of impact on the wider economy are not necessarily things that a private sector investor would take a view on. And I think it's the same with all the big infrastructure projects. And the great misnomer about high speed, let's say, as an investment, is we would need a new line on a classic rail, an extension to classic rail anyway, regardless of its speed. So if high speed's going to cost 10 or 15% more than an ordinary rail line, which we'd need anyway, well, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer, really, it feels to me. But that kind of argument's not out there. So the other thing about the procurements is, regardless of the technicalities, is they kind of don't, if I'm being critical, they don't label them right. High speed is not about speed, actually. It's also about capacity and it's about connectivity, and we've all kind of lost that sort of message in a number of ways, really. And the big infrastructure projects in the UK, actually, are we ambitious enough is the question back in my mind. So if you look at Crossrail, you know, remember there was a big supplementary business rate across London that kind of underpinned a lot of the Crossrail investment. Well, you know, if we were in Japan or we were in other parts of the world, that's actually quite a common tool to kind of invest in your local economic infrastructure. So if we were given the kind of tools to do that, I don't think government would need to wrestle with all the kind of challenges that it does. It could devolve a lot of that more out.
Mm-hmm. If anyone else wants to give the DFT a kick?
No, well, I think as I've alluded to, I think historically there has been an issue in terms of the cohesiveness of the department and representing transport more widely on an integrated basis. But to have a positive note here, I do think that the government understands how important transport is and can be, particularly in the current climate, in terms of creating opportunities for economic growth. And I think transport is probably higher in terms of political priority than it has been for a long time. And I think the DFT is now set up to respond to that. I mentioned there's a strategy unit, and they are open for business. They seem to be very approachable, and I've seen them a number of times really engaging with businesses in different forums to try and get ideas and encourage participation from, the regions and from local authorities on the ground. So I think there's a positive outlook, actually.
Okay. One more question.
So Charles Clifford from Wragge. It's interesting, we're talking about transport. We've heard several times about vision. For example, Manchester's fathers in the 60s building something which was far too big at the time. I'm interested that we've not heard anyone mention 2030, 2035. Where we're going to be in the time where infrastructure, which is now being planned, will be implemented. It's going to be in a world where we've probably got a much higher oil price. We've got need to decarbonise transport. And we've got here a city which is very, very heavily road transport focused, which has limited circular links around it. But a whole lot of issues, which if you take this as a theoretical city exercise, need to be solved. The question for the panel really is, do we think we've got the vision in the Midlands to create a plan for 2030 which we can start selling and impressing on whoever it is at DFT, and what we need to do? Because I suspect unless you go with a really clear shopping list, you're not going to be taken seriously. It's all going to be very piecemeal. Do you think we can actually achieve that in West Midlands?
Anyone like to pick up on this one? We do need to draw to a close early.
I think it goes back to the previous question about the Department for Transport and vision. What we probably need is a transport for Birmingham. Because TfL, whether we like it, has done a fantastic job. They really have. The Olympics was well managed and shows what can be done. I think CENTRO has done a great job, but there's lots of tensions within the region, and I think we have to just get over the fact that Birmingham is bigger than Birmingham City. It's across the region. The travel to work area, the LEP area, needs to be coordinated in a Transport for Birmingham-like organisation, which has got a clear vision of how they build the metro to these key gateways of New Street, the new HS2 station, the airport station, but so that people in Kidderminster, people in Solihull, people in Walsall can get to the centre or get to these key nodes. And that vision, 2030, I think, is already in place. Everything we're doing now will be delivered. I don't think there's anything extra coming along, perhaps extensions to the metro. It's 2040 and 2050 where that vision now needs to be articulated of where we're going. And I think the Department for Transport needs a counterweight, and the counterweight has to be a very strong Transport for Birmingham organisation.
I think Paul is right in that the scene is very much set for 2030, and I think HS2 is a very good example of that, because that is really medium to long-term thinking, and that actually sets out the framework which we need to respond to about actually how we change our transport networks to actually link in with HS2 and that extra international and national connectivity that brings. I think that vision is there, and I think what we're getting now is that shared vision between the different partners, whether it be the LEPs or the local authorities.
Right, at that point, I'll draw things to a close. Immediately after Gary has made his closing statement, there'll be two queues outside. The one on the left is people who want to invest in Birmingham Airport, and the one on the right, you can collect your free RJF branded transport anoraks. So do enjoy that. Gary.
Thank you very much, Mark. Gary Harding, Chair of Birmingham Forward, and it is indeed a pleasure to be here hosting the joint event with the Urban Land Institute. I think before the vote of thanks, just a little reflection as I was sat listening to the debate. I've worked all my working life in this city, which is a fair few years now. Came to this city as a graduate, which is obviously a fair few years ago. But I genuinely believe that this city, at this present moment in time, is on the cusp of something quite major. Notwithstanding the level of investment that's going into our infrastructure system, the developments that are happening, but the people I talk to in my day-to-day life, the investors that are new to this city, the people that are actually undertaking new schemes in this city, there's a real buzz about where this city is going, what it's about, and we've not had that for many, many years. We get there and then we lose it. But at the moment, this city really does seem to be punching above its weight, and notwithstanding the Conservative Party conference we've got in town today, it's up to you, all of you in this room, to do your bit, to not hide in the shadows and sort of make the excuse about X, Y or Z, but get out there, talk to these politicians, sell this city, and actually take the message that this city needs investment and what we can do collectively to make it happen. And I think, we've heard about high speed too. It's not a debate now for us to sort of sit back and let the politicians debate it. We've got to be part of that debate. Business has got to take its message to government. It can tie in with a whole host of other bodies. Birmingham Forward will be doing its bit, but we've got to actually be animated about this debate and say that we want it, if that is what we want. We've got to make it different. We've got to make it happen. So, without that little bit of a platform, sort of one in the arm for Birmingham, my thanks to the Urban Land Institute and RJF Public Affairs for hosting this, together with Wilmot Dixon and Colliers, even though they're not in the room. I'd also just like, have we got anyone in from Colliers? No, one's still in. Right. Well, big plug for Colliers there, even though they're not here. I also just want to thank our panel members. Obviously, everyone's extremely busy. To Mark Barrow, Duncan Field, Paul Kehoe, Tom McGrath and Marc Reeves for moderating the event so well. I just also want to give a plug for the next Birmingham Forward event, which takes place on the 24th of October. I mention it because it ties very neatly into some of the discussion you've heard today. We've got Andy Street of the Greater Birmingham Solihull LEP talking to us. And again, we've given him a very specific brief about not what's been going on, but where are the successes, what's happening, and we really want an engaged debate around that and the work that the LEP is really now moving into. So with that, I believe there's tea and coffee afterwards, so do stay around to catch up with people, and if you can thank the panel speakers in the normal way, thank you.
Well, that's fun. Good. Well done. Could do it all again.